Lisa had been living in the small town of Riverside for 15 years now. She was 42 years old, and if you asked anyone in town about her, they'd probably say she was nice but quiet. The kind of person who smiled when you passed her in the grocery store but never really stopped to chat for long. She worked at the community center as a librarian. It wasn't a fancy job, but she liked it. The smell of old books, the quiet afternoons, the way sunlight came through the tall windows and made dust particles dance in the air. It was peaceful. That's what she wanted. Peace. Every morning, Lisa would arrive at work with her coffee in a plain blue mug. She'd unlock the library doors, turn on the soft overhead lights, and start her day organizing returned books. Her co-workers were friendly enough, but Lisa kept to herself mostly. She'd eat lunch alone at her desk, usually a sandwich she'd made at home with a book propped open beside her plate. Nobody really knew much about Lisa's life before Riverside. Where had she come from? Did she have family? What made her move to such a small town? After 15 years, people had stopped asking. She'd become part of the furniture, so to speak. Just another familiar face in a place where everyone knew everyone. But Lisa liked it that way. She'd made a choice long ago to live simply. Her apartment was small but comfortable. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen where she'd make tea every evening, and a living room with a couch and way too many books stacked on every available surface. She had a cat named Charlie who was getting old and spent most of his time sleeping in patches of sunlight. On Sundays, Lisa would walk to the farmer's market downtown. She'd buy fresh vegetables from the same vendors, exchange polite hellos, and walk back home. It was routine. It was safe. And after years of chaos, safety was everything to her. The community center where she worked was more than just a library. It had a gym, meeting rooms, and a big hall where they held events. Every year they organized a talent show fundraiser. It was a big deal for Riverside. Local kids would sing, someone would do a magic trick, the mayor might tell a few jokes. It was wholesome fun and the whole town showed up. This year was no different. The talent show was 3 weeks away and the break room at work was buzzing with excitement. A sign-up sheet was making its rounds, and people were already practicing their acts during lunch breaks. Lisa could hear someone singing in the bathroom yesterday. Not well, but enthusiastically. "Come on, you should do something this year," said Danny, one of her co-workers. He was the activities coordinator, always cheerful, always trying to get everyone involved. He'd been working at the center for 5 years and probably asked Lisa to participate in something at least once a month. Lisa shook her head with a small smile. "I'm fine helping with the setup." "You know I'm not much for performing." Danny shrugged good-naturedly. "One of these years I'll convince you." She doubted it. The truth was, Lisa avoided the spotlight like some people avoided the dentist. She didn't sing in the shower. She didn't dance at weddings. She preferred to blend into the background, to be invisible. After what she'd been through, invisibility felt like a gift. But there was something in the community center that Lisa couldn't quite ignore, no matter how hard she tried. In the storage room at the back of the building, past the folding chairs and old decorations, sat a grand piano. A Steinway, actually. Someone had donated it years ago, and it had been sitting there collecting dust ever since. Recently, the center had decided to restore it for the talent show. They'd paid to have it tuned, polished the wood until it gleamed, and planned to roll it onto the stage as the centerpiece of the event. It was beautiful. Deep black wood, ivory keys that looked like they'd never been touched. Lisa walked past that storage room every single day. Usually, she kept her eyes forward, focused on wherever she was going. But sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she'd pause in the doorway. Her fingers would twitch slightly at her sides like they were remembering something her mind was trying to forget. She hadn't touched a piano in 13 years. Before that, she'd gone 2 years without playing. 15 years total since she'd played the way she used to, the way she'd been trained to, the way that had once defined her entire existence. Sometimes, late at night in her apartment, Lisa would flex her fingers and remember how it felt. The weight of the keys, the vibration of sound traveling up through her hands and arms, the way a single note could fill an entire concert hall, could make thousands of people hold their breath at once. But then she'd remember the other parts too, the parts she'd been running from. And she'd make herself a cup of tea instead, curl up with Charlie and read until she was tired enough to sleep without dreaming. The day of the talent show approached quickly. The community center transformed into organized chaos. Volunteers decorated the main hall with streamers and balloons. Someone was testing the sound system, which kept making horrible screeching noises. Kids ran around excitedly in costumes, and their parents tried to keep them calm. Lisa had volunteered to help backstage. She wore her usual clothes, nothing special, just jeans and a comfortable sweater. She carried a clipboard and helped performers know when it was their turn to go on. It was perfect. She could be useful without being seen. The restored piano had been rolled to the center of the stage that morning. It looked magnificent under the lights. 3 different acts were planning to use it. A 10-year-old girl would play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The church choir director would accompany a soloist. And Danny himself was planning some kind of comedy bit. During rehearsal breaks, Lisa found herself staring at that piano more than she meant to. It called to her in a way that was almost physical. She knew exactly how those keys would feel under her fingers. She knew what sounds that particular instrument could make. Steinway's had a specific tone, warm and rich and powerful all at once. "You okay?" asked Rebecca, another volunteer. She was a kind woman in her 60s who ran the local bookshop. Lisa startled slightly. "Oh, yes. Just thinking about the schedule." Rebecca smiled knowingly but didn't push. That was another thing Lisa appreciated about Riverside. People didn't push. As the day wore on and the talent show drew closer, Lisa tried to focus on her tasks. She made sure everyone had water bottles backstage. She organized the props. She smiled and encouraged nervous performers. She did everything she could to keep busy, but her eyes kept drifting back to that piano. Sitting there on the stage, gleaming and perfect, it represented everything she'd walked away from, everything she'd lost and everything she'd chosen to leave behind. For 15 years, she'd built a life without music, a simple life, a safe life. She told herself she was happy, and mostly she was. The library, the cat, the Sunday markets. It was enough. It had to be enough. The audience started filing into the hall. Families with excited children, elderly couples holding hands, teenagers who'd been dragged along but were secretly looking forward to it. The seats filled up quickly. The energy in the room built. Backstage, performers did last-minute warm-ups and adjusted their costumes. Lisa checked her clipboard for the 100th time. Everything was ready. The show would start in 15 minutes. She just needed to stay backstage, do her job, and get through the evening. Then she could go home to Charlie and her quiet apartment and her perfectly ordinary life. She had no idea that in less than an hour, that life would change forever. All because of a joke she wasn't supposed to take seriously. The talent show started right on time. Lisa stood in the wings, clipboard pressed against her chest, watching as the mayor walked onto the stage to welcome everyone. The audience clapped politely and the room settled into an excited hush. The first few acts went smoothly. A group of middle school kids performed a dance routine to a pop song. They weren't perfectly in sync, but they smiled the whole time and the audience loved it. Then came Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who owned the flower shop, singing an old country song. Her voice wavered a bit, but it was sweet and heartfelt. Between acts, Lisa guided performers to the stage entrance, whispered encouragement, and made sure props were in the right place. It was exactly the kind of behind-the-scenes work she preferred. Useful but invisible. The 10-year-old girl, Amy, played her simple piece on the piano. Her parents recorded it on their phones from the front row, beaming with pride. The notes were sometimes hesitant and she had to start one section over, but she made it through. The audience gave her a warm round of applause. During intermission, people stretched their legs and grabbed refreshments from the snack table the PTA had set up. Backstage, performers relaxed a little. The nervous energy shifted to relief for those who'd already gone on, and mounting anxiety for those still waiting. Danny, the activities coordinator, was up after intermission. He was planning something comedic with the piano, though he'd been secretive about the details. Lisa had seen him practicing chopsticks earlier in the week with exaggerated, dramatic movements. It would be silly and fun, perfect for Danny's personality. As people returned to their seats, Danny bounded onto the stage with his usual energy. He wore a ridiculous fake tuxedo jacket over his regular clothes and carried himself like he was about to perform at Carnegie Hall instead of the Riverside Community Center. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced in an overly formal voice, "I shall now perform one of the most challenging pieces in the entire piano repertoire." The audience chuckled. They knew Danny. This was clearly a setup for a joke. He walked to the piano with exaggerated seriousness and noticed some sheet music sitting on top. Someone had left it there as a gag earlier. Lisa recognized it immediately, though she doubted anyone else in the room did. It was Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, one of the most impossibly difficult pieces ever written for piano. Danny picked up the sheet music and held it up for the audience to see. "Ah yes, Rachmaninoff. Perfect." More laughter rippled through the crowd. The name sounded fancy and foreign, which made it funnier coming from Danny in his fake tuxedo. "You know," Danny continued, warming up to his bit, "they say only the greatest pianists in the world can play this piece. It's so hard that most professional musicians won't even attempt it." He was playing it up, having fun. This was Danny's style. Big personality, self-deprecating humor. Everyone was enjoying it. Then his eyes swept across the backstage area and landed on Lisa, standing just off stage with her clipboard. His face lit up with inspiration, the way it did when he thought of a way to include everyone in the fun. "Hey, Lisa," he called out loud enough for the whole audience to hear. "You're always so quiet and mysterious. Maybe you have secret talents we don't know about." Lisa felt her stomach drop. A few people in the audience turned to look toward the wings, trying to spot her. She took a small step backward, hoping Danny would move on with his joke. But Danny was on a roll now, playing to the crowd. "What do you think, folks? Should we get Lisa out here to show us how it's done?" Some people clapped encouragingly. It was all in good fun. Nobody actually expected anything. Danny grinned and gestured dramatically at the piano. "Come on, Lisa, you can't possibly play this, right? It's literally one of the hardest pieces of music ever written." He said it like it was the most ridiculous suggestion in the world, like asking if she could fly or juggle flaming torches. It was meant to be absurd, funny. The audience laughed along. A few coworkers backstage smiled at Lisa sympathetically, expecting her to wave Danny off and let him get on with his comedy routine. But something happened in that moment. Something Lisa hadn't felt in 15 years. It started in her chest, a tight feeling. Not quite anger, but close. Not quite hurt, but something in that neighborhood. It was the feeling of being underestimated, of being invisible by choice and having someone accidentally poke at exactly why she'd chosen invisibility in the first place. Her hands, which had been gripping the clipboard, slowly relaxed. Her fingers flexed once, twice. Muscle memory that had been sleeping for over a decade began to wake up. Danny was still talking, moving toward his punchline. "I mean, seriously, can you imagine? Our librarian playing Rachmaninoff? That would be like, I can," Lisa said quietly. Her voice was so soft that only the people immediately around her heard it at first. Danny kept talking for another second before he registered that she'd spoken. "What was that?" he asked, his comedy persona slipping slightly. Lisa stepped out from the wings onto the stage. The lights were bright, much brighter than she'd expected. She hadn't stood in stage lights in 15 years. The audience became a blur of faces, all turning toward her with curiosity and confusion. "I said I can," Lisa repeated, louder this time. Her voice didn't shake, which surprised her. "I can play it." The laughter in the room died down. People weren't sure if this was part of Danny's act or something else. Danny himself looked uncertain, his smile wavering. He'd meant it as a joke, a playful tease. The last thing he wanted was to actually put Lisa on the spot. "Oh, hey, Lisa, I was just kidding around," he said quickly, dropping the theatrical voice. "You don't have to." But Lisa was already walking toward the piano. Her legs moved almost on their own, following a path her body remembered even if her mind had tried to forget. 15 years of carefully constructed walls of choosing to be small and quiet and unremarkable, cracked with each step. She could have laughed it off, could have smiled and shaken her head and gone back to her safe spot in the wings. That's what the Lisa of the past 15 years would have done. But something about Danny's words had hit a nerve. You can't possibly play that. The assumption that she couldn't. That the quiet librarian was incapable of something extraordinary. It was exactly the kind of anonymity she'd wanted. She'd worked hard for it, so why did it suddenly sting? Rebecca, the bookshop owner, started to stand from her seat in the third row, concern on her face. She knew Lisa well enough to sense that something was happening. Something bigger than a comedy bit at a community talent show. Danny backed away from the piano, still apologetic. "Seriously, Lisa, I didn't mean anything by it." "You don't have to. It's okay," Lisa said. Her voice was calm now, steady. She reached the piano bench and stood beside it. her hand resting lightly on the polished wood. The audience had gone completely silent. Whatever they'd expected from intermission entertainment, this wasn't it. The energy in the room had shifted from lighthearted fun to something else. Something uncertain and electric. Lisa looked down at the piano keys. 88 keys, black and white, arranged in the same pattern they'd been for centuries. She knew every one of them, had known them since she was 5 years old. They'd been her first language, more fluent than English, more natural than speech. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. 15 years. It had been 15 years since she'd played like she used to, 13 since she'd touched a piano at all. What if she couldn't do it anymore? What if the ability had left her, abandoned her the way she'd abandoned it? But then her fingers touched the keys and she knew. The way you know how to swim even after years out of the water. The way you never forget how to ride a bike. Some things live in your bones. Lisa adjusted the bench, checking the height with the precision of someone who'd done it 10,000 times before. She sat down, her posture changing instantly. Shoulders relaxed but ready. Back straight. Feet positioned on the floor. The shy librarian was gone. In her place sat someone the people of Riverside had never seen before. Someone they didn't know existed. Lisa placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The first notes filled the community, center like water filling an empty glass. Soft at first, almost gentle, then building, growing, becoming something else entirely. Lisa's fingers moved across the keys with a speed that seemed impossible. Her left hand played deep rumbling bass notes while her right hand danced through intricate melodies high on the keyboard. The two hands moved independently, like they belonged to different people, yet created a sound that was perfectly unified. In the audience, mouths fell open. Danny stood frozen at the edge of the stage, his comedy routine completely forgotten. This wasn't someone who'd taken a few piano lessons as a kid. This was something else, something extraordinary. The piece Lisa was playing was known among musicians as one of the most brutally difficult compositions ever written. It required hands that could stretch across multiple octaves in an instant. It demanded fingers that could move faster than seemed humanly possible. It asked the pianist to think in multiple layers of music simultaneously, to hear melodies and harmonies and rhythms all at once, and bring them together into something coherent. Most professional pianists avoided it. Even among concert performers, only the very best dared to attempt it, and Lisa was playing it from memory. Her eyes were closed now, her face peaceful, despite the intense concentration required. Her whole body moved with the music, swaying slightly, feeling every note not just in her hands but in her chest, her shoulders, her core. This wasn't just technical skill. This was someone who'd lived inside music so long that it had become part of her. The audience sat transfixed. Parents who'd brought their kids for a cute community show found themselves witnessing something they'd only seen on concert recordings. The mayor, sitting in the front row, had tears in his eyes, though he couldn't have explained why. Music does that sometimes. Real music played with real feeling. It reaches past your thoughts and grabs something deeper. Lisa's hands flew across the keyboard in cascading runs. Notes poured out so fast they almost blurred together, yet each one was crystal clear. She played chords that required her hands to stretch impossibly wide, her fingers finding the exact right keys without her eyes to guide them. Rebecca, the bookshop owner, grabbed her husband's hand without looking away from the stage. She'd known Lisa for 15 years. They'd had coffee together. They'd talked about books and weather and the price of vegetables at the farmer's market. But she'd never known this. How could anyone hide something this big? The piece shifted moods. From the thundering power of the opening, Lisa moved into a quieter section. Her touch became delicate, almost fragile. Single notes rang out like drops of water, each one perfectly placed, perfectly timed. The silence between the notes became just as important as the notes themselves. People in the audience leaned forward unconsciously, drawn in by the intimacy of it. In a room full of 100 people, it somehow felt like Lisa was playing just for each individual person, like the music was speaking directly to something private inside them. Then the power came roaring back. Lisa's hands crashed down on the lower keys, creating sounds that seemed too big to come from a single instrument. Her right hand raced up the keyboard in patterns so complex they looked like a visual effect rather than something a human could actually do. A teenager in the back row started recording on his phone. Then his mother did too. Within moments, dozens of phones were out, capturing this impossible thing that was happening at their small-town talent show. The piece continued for what felt like both seconds and hours. Time worked differently when music was this good. Lisa moved through sections that required different techniques, different skills. Soft and loud, fast and slow, delicate and powerful. She played music that seemed to tell a story without words, that painted pictures without colors, that expressed emotions too complex for language. Her forehead glistened with a light sweat. Playing at this level was physically demanding, like running a marathon while solving complex math problems in your head. But Lisa never faltered. Her fingers never missed. Every note landed exactly where it needed to be. Danny finally moved from his frozen position at the stage edge. He quietly walked off stage, his fake tuxedo jacket suddenly feeling ridiculous. He stood in the wings next to the other volunteers, all of them watching with the same shocked expression. "Did you know?" whispered Tom, the janitor who'd worked at the center for 20 years. Danny shook his head, unable to speak. On stage, Lisa reached what musicians call the cadenza, a section where the pianist plays alone without orchestra, showing off their highest level of skill. It's the moment in the piece where the performer proves what they're really capable of. Lisa's hands became a blur. Scales that ran up and down the entire length of the keyboard, arpeggios that swooped and dove like birds in flight, octaves that thundered and whispered, trills that shimmered like heat waves. The technical demands were staggering, but Lisa made it look effortless, like this was the most natural thing in the world for her. Like the piano was an extension of her own body, responding to her thoughts before her fingers even moved. In the audience, Amy's mother leaned down to her daughter, the little girl who'd played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star earlier. "That's Miss Lisa from the library," she whispered. "You've checked out books from her." Amy stared at the stage with wide eyes. "But she never told us she could do that." Her mother had no answer. None of them did. The piece built toward its conclusion. Lisa's playing grew more intense, more passionate. Her whole body was engaged now, rocking slightly with the force of the chords she was producing. The piano itself seemed to shake under the power of the sound. She played huge, sweeping chords that filled the entire room, that made the windows rattle slightly in their frames. Then suddenly, delicate single notes like stars appearing one by one in a night sky. Then power again, building and building. The final section arrived. The moment the entire piece had been building toward. Lisa's hands moved with impossible precision, playing patterns that seemed designed to be unplayable. But she played them. Every note clear, every rhythm exact, every dynamic perfect, and then, with a final series of thundering chords that seemed to shake the very foundation of the community center, it was over. Lisa's hands came to rest on the keys. She sat perfectly still, her eyes still closed, her breathing deep and steady. The sound of the final chord hung in the air, gradually fading into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The audience sat frozen, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. It was like being shaken awake from a dream and needing a moment to remember where you were. Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. Then everyone at once. The applause wasn't polite or encouraging like it had been for the other acts. This was different. This was the kind of applause that happens when people witness something they know they'll remember for the rest of their lives. The kind that comes from genuine awe. People stood up, the whole audience on their feet, clapping until their hands hurt. Some were crying. Some were laughing in disbelief. Some were doing both. Danny started to step back onto the stage to thank Lisa, to say something, anything. But he stopped. This moment wasn't about him or his comedy routine or the talent show. This was something bigger. Lisa finally opened her eyes. She looked out at the standing ovation, at the faces of people she'd worked with for 15 years, people she'd helped find library books and signed up for community programs. People who thought they knew her. She saw their shock, their confusion, their amazement. And for the first time in 15 years, Lisa felt the weight of what she'd been carrying. The secret she'd kept, the life she'd hidden, the person she used to be before she became the quiet librarian who wanted nothing more than to disappear. The applause continued, wave after wave of it. But Lisa barely heard it anymore. All she could hear was the echo of the music fading away, and the sound of the walls she'd built around herself finally crumbling down. Lisa slipped away while the applause was still echoing through the hall. She moved quickly through the backstage curtain, past the other performers who stared at her with new eyes, and into the storage room where the old piano had sat for years collecting dust. Her hands were shaking now, not from the physical effort of playing, but from everything else. The adrenaline, the memories, the feeling of 15 years of careful hiding being stripped away in 20 minutes. She sat down on a stack of folding chairs in the dim room, trying to catch her breath. Her heart pounded in her chest. What had she done? What had she just done? The talent show continued without her. She could hear the muffled sounds of the next act starting, the audience settling back into their seats. Life going on? But nothing would be the same now. She knew that. A soft knock came at the storage room door. Lisa looked up to see Danny standing there, holding 2 bottles of water. His fake tuxedo jacket was gone. He looked smaller somehow, uncertain in a way she'd never seen him before. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Lisa nodded. She didn't trust her voice yet. Danny came in and handed her one of the water bottles. He sat down on a plastic storage bin a few feet away, giving her space. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I'm so sorry," Danny finally said. His voice was thick with genuine regret. "Lisa, I never meant to put you on the spot like that. I was just goofing around. I had no idea that you could actually—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I don't even know what to say." "It's okay," Lisa managed. Her voice came out rough, so she took a sip of water. "You didn't know." "But that's just it," Danny said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "How did I not know? We've worked together for 5 years. We have lunch in the same break room. We've done dozens of events together. And I never knew you could play like that." He paused. "Nobody knew." Lisa stared at the water bottle in her hands. The condensation made little droplets that ran down the plastic. She watched them instead of looking at Danny. "Who are you?" he asked. It wasn't accusatory. It was honest curiosity mixed with something that sounded like hurt. "I mean, who were you? Before you came to Riverside?" Lisa was quiet for so long that Danny started to apologize again, started to say she didn't have to tell him anything. But then she started talking. Once she began, the words came easier than she expected. Her name used to be different. Well, sort of. Lisa Chen, not just Lisa. 20 years ago, she'd been known in certain circles. Concert halls, music magazines, classical music forums where people debated the interpretations of various pianists, the way sports fans debated athletes. She'd been a prodigy. One of those kids who gets discovered young and pushed hard. Her parents were musicians, both of them, and they'd recognized her talent when she was barely old enough to reach the piano keys. By the time she was 8, she was playing pieces that most adults couldn't manage. By 16, she was performing with orchestras. "I won competitions," Lisa said, her voice distant like she was talking about someone else. "Big ones, the kind that opened doors. By the time I was 25, I was touring internationally. London, Paris, Tokyo, New York, all the major concert halls." Danny listened without interrupting. He could sense that she needed to get this out. "Everyone had expectations," Lisa continued. "My parents expected me to be perfect. My teachers expected brilliance. Critics expected innovation. Audiences expected to be blown away every single time." She took another sip of water, and for a while I delivered. I was good at meeting expectations. It's what I'd been trained to do my whole life. She explained how the pressure built gradually, like water filling a tank. Each performance added a little more. Each review, each comparison to other pianists, each time someone called her a genius or a prodigy, or the future of classical piano, the water kept rising. "I never had a normal childhood," Lisa said. "While other kids were playing soccer or going to birthday parties, I was practicing 6, 7, 8 hours a day. I ate meals at the piano. I dreamed about music. It was everything." Danny wanted to say something comforting, but he sensed she wasn't finished. "When I was 27, I had a performance at one of the most prestigious venues in the world. It should have been the highlight of my career. I'd prepared for months. The piece was perfect. I knew every note." Lisa's hands tightened around the water bottle, but halfway through my hands just stopped. Right there on stage, in front of thousands of people, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't remember where I was or what I was doing. "A panic attack," Danny said softly. Lisa nodded. "Complete breakdown. Right there under the lights. I walked off stage and never went back. Not to that hall, not to any hall. I was done." She told him how she'd disappeared from the music world, changed her last name, moved away from the city. avoided anything that might connect her to her past. For 2 years, she didn't touch a piano at all. Couldn't even listen to classical music without feeling her chest tighten. When I finally did play again, it was in the middle of the night in a music store that had closed down, Lisa said. I broke in, basically. Just needed to know if I still could. And I could. But it felt different. It hurt. For the next 13 years, she avoided pianos, avoided music. Built a life that was as far from concert halls and competitions as she could get. A quiet life, a safe life. Riverside felt like the right place, Lisa said. Nobody here cared about classical music. Nobody knew who I was. I could just be the librarian. Just Lisa. Not the prodigy, not the performer, not the girl who had a breakdown on stage. Just me. Danny sat back, processing everything. But you played tonight, why? After all that, after 15 years of staying hidden, why did you play? Lisa thought about that. She'd been asking herself the same question since the moment her hands touched the keys. I think, she said slowly, I think I was tired of being afraid. When you made that joke, when you said I couldn't possibly play it, something in me just snapped. Not in an angry way, more like a wire that had been pulled too tight finally breaking. She looked at her hands. They'd stopped shaking now. For 15 years, I've been running from that night when I broke down. I convinced myself that if I never performed again, never put myself out there, I'd be safe from that kind of pain. But I wasn't living. I was just hiding. And now? Danny asked. Lisa laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Now I don't know. Everyone saw. By tomorrow, everyone in town will know. The video is probably already online. Someone will recognize me, connect me to my old name. The quiet life I built here is over. They sat in silence for a moment. From outside the storage room, they could hear the talent show wrapping up. The mayor was thanking everyone for coming, reminding them about the fundraiser donations. For what it's worth, Danny said, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I've been to concerts, listened to recordings, all of that. But what you played tonight was something else. It was real. Lisa looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since he'd come into the room. Thank you, she said quietly. For what it's worth, I needed this to happen. I didn't know I needed it, but I did. So thank you for your stupid joke. Danny smiled a little. Worst comedy routine ever. Best comedy routine ever, Lisa corrected. They both stood up. The talent show was over. Soon people would come looking for her, wanting answers, wanting to know the truth about the mysterious librarian who could play like that. Lisa took a deep breath and opened the storage room door. It was time to face the music. By Monday morning, everything had changed. The video from the talent show had been shared hundreds of times over the weekend. Someone had posted it to a classical music forum with the title, Mystery Pianist at Small Town Talent Show. Within hours, people started recognizing Lisa. Not just her playing, but her face. Old photos were dug up from archived concert programs and music magazines from 20 years ago. That's Lisa Chen, someone commented. She disappeared from the concert circuit years ago. I thought she'd quit music entirely. Lisa's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The local newspaper wanted an interview. A music blog requested a statement. Someone from a classical radio station left 3 voicemails. Even her old music school reached out, saying they'd love to reconnect. She turned her phone off and sat in her apartment with Charlie, trying to figure out what to do next. The person she'd been trying to leave behind had found her. And now the whole world knew where she was. On Tuesday, Lisa called in sick to work. Then Wednesday. Then Thursday. She knew she was being a coward, but she needed time to think.
Time to process.
Time to figure out who she was now that the wall between her past and present had completely collapsed. Rebecca stopped by her apartment on Thursday evening, carrying a container of homemade soup and a determined expression. You can't hide forever, Rebecca said, settling onto Lisa's couch despite not being invited in. And before you say anything, I'm not here to push you or make you do anything you don't want to do. I'm here as your friend. Lisa sat down in the chair across from her, pulling her knees up to her chest. She looked smaller than usual, younger even though the stress of the past few days had added new lines around her eyes. I don't know what to do, Lisa admitted. Everything I built here was based on nobody knowing who I was. Now everyone knows. How do I go back to the library and shelve books like nothing happened? Who says nothing happened? Rebecca asked gently. Something did happen. Something big. You played music in front of people for the first time in 15 years and it was beautiful. Why does that have to be a bad thing? Because I left that life for a reason, Lisa said. The pressure, the expectations, the feeling that I was never good enough no matter how perfectly I played. I can't go back to that. Then don't, Rebecca said simply. Nobody's asking you to go back to that. But you can't pretend it didn't happen either. You can't pretend you're not extraordinary at something. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Everyone at work must think I'm so weird. Hiding something like that for 15 years. Actually, Rebecca said with a small smile, most people are just impressed, and a little hurt that you didn't trust them enough to share it, but mostly impressed. Over soup, Rebecca told her what had been happening in town. The community center had been fielding calls all week. The local arts council wanted to know if Lisa would consider giving a concert. The high school music teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had asked if Lisa might be willing to talk to her advanced students about music as a career. And there's something else, Rebecca said carefully. Mrs. Rodriguez runs a program for kids who can't afford private music lessons. She's been trying to find someone to teach piano for years, but the only teachers in town charge too much for her program's budget. She was wondering if you might consider volunteering, just once a week. No pressure to perform or anything like that. Just teaching. Lisa thought about that. Teaching. She'd never taught before. Her own learning had been so intense, so focused on performance and perfection. Could she teach differently? Could she show kids that music could be joyful instead of stressful? I'll think about it, Lisa said. On Friday, Lisa went back to work. She felt like everyone was staring at her as she walked into the community center. But when she got to the library, her co-workers greeted her normally. Well, mostly normally. There was definitely more curiosity in their eyes than usual. Danny approached her at lunch looking nervous.
Hey, can we talk?
They went outside to the picnic tables behind the building. It was a nice day, sunny and warm. The kind of day that made everything feel a little more hopeful. I've been thinking about what you told me, Danny said, about why you left music, about the pressure and everything. And I just want you to know that nobody here expects anything from you. You don't owe anyone performances or explanations or anything else. You're just Lisa, our coworker, our friend. Lisa felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you. That means a lot. But, Danny continued, if you ever wanted to play again just for fun, just because you wanted to, the piano's still there, and I promise not to make any more stupid jokes. Lisa laughed. It felt good to laugh. Your jokes weren't that stupid. Over the next few weeks, Lisa started to find a new rhythm. She went back to work at the library. She still ate lunch quietly, still preferred books to small talk, still lived her simple life. But now people knew there was more to her, and somehow that was okay. She called Mrs. Rodriguez and agreed to teach piano one afternoon a week. The first class was terrifying. She stood in front of 8 kids aged 10 to 15, all looking at her with wide eyes because they'd seen the viral video. Okay, Lisa said, her voice shaky at first. So I'm going to teach you piano. But first I want to tell you something important. Music isn't about being perfect. It's not about playing every note exactly right or impressing people. It's about expressing something that words can't say. She sat down at the classroom's old upright piano. I spent most of my life thinking music was about perfection, and it nearly destroyed me. So we're going to do this differently. We're going to focus on enjoying it, on feeling it, on making mistakes and learning from them and not being afraid to try. The kids loved her. She was patient in a way her own teachers never had been. She encouraged them when they messed up instead of criticizing. She taught them songs they actually wanted to learn, not just classical pieces from textbooks. One afternoon, a 13-year-old student named Kevin stayed after class. He was shy, reminded Lisa of herself at that age. Miss Lisa, he said quietly, can I ask you something? In the video, you looked really happy when you were playing, but you said music almost destroyed you. How can both be true? Lisa thought about that question for a long time. Music itself didn't hurt me, she finally said. What hurt me was losing myself in other people's expectations, forgetting why I loved it in the first place. But when I played at the talent show, I wasn't playing for critics or audiences or my parents. I was playing for me, and that made all the difference. A month after the talent show, the community center organized a small fundraiser concert. They asked Lisa if she'd play but made it clear she could absolutely say no. She said yes. This time it was different. She chose the pieces herself. Nothing too complicated or showy, just music she loved. She played in front of 100 people in the same community center hall, but instead of terror, she felt calm. When she finished, the applause was just as loud as before. But this time, when she stood up from the piano, she smiled. A real smile. After the concert, Rebecca hugged her. "I'm proud of you." "For what?" Lisa asked. "For finding your way back. Not to who you were, but to who you want to be." Lisa looked around the community center, at the people she worked with, the students she taught, the town that had become her home. She thought about her small apartment and her old cat and her Sunday walks to the farmer's market. Her life was still simple, still quiet, but now it included music again on her own terms. She'd spent 15 years running from her past, afraid that it would swallow her whole. But what she'd learned was that you don't have to choose between who you were and who you are. You can be both. You can take the parts that matter and leave the rest behind. The piano would always be part of her. But it didn't have to define her. It didn't have to be everything. It could just be one beautiful piece of a much larger life. And that was enough.